I am currently standing by the River Medway, which is the gateway to Kent, pretty much. Links up a few major towns in Kent, like Tunbridge, Rochester, Chatham, etc. Over there is Snodland, that's the church in Snodland, and behind you, which we're going to film later, is Burham. I'm actually currently standing on probably one of the most important battle sites that we've ever had in the whole of our English history. So important, in fact, that it actually pretty much overshadows battles such as the Battle of Naseby, the Battle of Bosworth, the Battle of 1066 in Hastings. It's that important. And what I'm here to do today is to try and show you, to try and emphasise how important this battle is on our English history and how it should be recognised slightly a bit more. So what I want to do is I'm going to explain a lot more things as we go along. I'm going to show you a few really important parts about this battle site, and we're going to go from then. Hopefully you can have a bit of fun whilst we do it. In 43 AD, Emperor Claudius decided that he'd had enough of us pesky Britons. Decided to launch an invasion force to conquer Britain as we know it. They landed at Richmond with 4 legions, which was consistent, if you think about it, every legion was fitted with 5,200 men approximately. It's a lot of men. It was a big statement that he was trying to say that he meant business and that we were going to conquer. Good old Britons didn't really like the idea of this, and they decided to retaliate. And this very site, in fact just up the road, it's pretty much where the biggest battle that ever decided the whole of English history happened. It would decide the language that we spoke, it would decide the religion that we were living by. It would also decide our future as to be a developing nation. Over there is Burham. And this is where the Romans would have invaded from. And they would have come from the east, landing at Richborough, coming all this way, possibly using what we now know as Pilgrim's Way, but probably back then was an old trackway. And over there, as you can see, this is where our Britons would have been. I'm standing at the stone that marks, that was built in 1997 to commemorate this famous battle. The reason, like I said, that I'm showing all you this on camera is to actually prove a point. That this literally was one of the most important battles there's ever been. And all there is just to mark a stone built in 1997. Can you believe that? In the Battle of Hastings we've got, you know, the Abbey that stands on top of the site where Harold died, and yet all we've got is this. And yeah, this was done, you know, 1066. This is over 1,000 years after this event had happened, and yet this was seriously, I kid you not, way more important to decide the future of our nation. Okay, so I want to describe to you about the tribes that were here. In the whole of the southeast region, there's a tribe called the Tecumseh tribe, who basically controlled what would now be obviously where we are at the moment, which is Kent. It was led by a very, very popular person in his time, which is called Caractacus, or Caractacus. The way to describe him probably was he was like the William Wallace of our day. The way that he actually managed to link up 3 different tribes to fight this Roman threat that was coming across. You know, without the boring speeches, but they were, you know, like it was quite an incredible feat. The numbers that were approximated for the Britons was about 150,000 troops. Now that is a hell of a lot. And like I've described to you before with the Romans, there was 4 legions, each legion containing 5,200 men. I mean, this was a serious battle. This wasn't child's play. You know, this was bigger than the Battle of Hastings, for example, yet again. Sorry to keep comparing that to it, but I mean this is how important it was. Main reason why I wanted to stand where I'm standing actually is just to highlight something really obvious. Over there, that is the River Medway. The River Medway is very important for a strategic reason. Is that when you're a marching army and you're coming across, in fact this does look like almost like a break, sort of like to cut halfway through across the land. Obviously the River Thames was still there, obviously, but that was going straight into London. Obviously the Romans decided that clearly marching across to wipe out this sort of nation, you know, it was probably a lot easier to do it this way. I just want to describe to you about this. This is no mean feat. I mean, this is really, really tricky. You know, you've got Romans who've got like armour, full body armour on, shields, swords, horses even. And they've got to cross this river, okay, knowing that there's going to be a massive force on the other side. I mean, just the sheer bravery of those people that were trying to do that. Even though I'm not a Romanite, I still find it quite an incredible thing to see. So, just picture this. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you the River Medway. I mean, this is, it's quite deep, you know. The reason why the battle took place here, they reckon, was actually because it was potentially at its lowest point. So the Romans, it was kind of not as easy to cross, but it was easier to cross. And that's why they sort of came around here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go around here. It follows the line. In fact, there's a bend that goes around there. Now they reckon that they crossed here, and then the battle was actually taken quite further up the river. So in other words, they kind of like do a... In fact, the idea was actually to sort of like pin the British tribe around. So what we're going to do next is we're going to describe the Roman side of things and how important it was for them. So I'm on the Roman side now. For the Romans, this was basically a case of conquer without question. The idea of them even boarding with such a large force was that they meant business. The idea was that actually Emperor Claudius had had enough of this whole trading business and he actually wanted a bit more. It was a case of empire building on a very grand scale. So you can tell that they came across from France, which they'd already pretty much conquered beforehand, and they came across and they meant business. The North Downs is over there, if you can see it, and this would have been a really good indicator to the Romans to follow as they came across. As they came across, they would have met lots of Britons who were probably farmers, because that was the whole point, farming culture, etc, etc, and obviously all the warriors had retreated and they came to this standoff here. Now, I talked about it before, but the Romans were heavily armoured. I mean, compared to the Britons who had shields, spears, you know, swords, you know, this was a clash of two completely different cultures. You know, this was a case of the modern meets the old. And we all know who won in the end. Okay, what I wanted to sort of like characterise to you before actually was I wanted to talk to you about Julius Caesar. And Julius Caesar, as we know, came, saw, but he didn't actually conquer. He was actually here for 2 months. And this was a long time before actually Emperor Claudius had decided that he wanted to invade. In fact, it was almost like a sort of pre-reconnaissance, you know, although done years and years before. In fact, it was done BC, and we're obviously in AD when this battle actually happened. Just to sort of get a scale of things, which I like to do quite a lot. The battle, as we know, it happened further up the river, but it was on this side, it was on the west side of the River Medway. Now, it was important that the Romans got first foothold on this. That was the whole reason for them crossing over in the first place, was that they weren't going to sit around and wait. They meant business. 3 legions first started off in the battle. It soon actually came down that the 4th legion would come down. I mean, like I said again, they were coming from the coastal side of Kent. A lot had changed back then. I mean, like, if people were watching this and they come from Sandwich, pretty much that was the area that they came from. In fact, you've got a Roman amphitheatre there and fort there now that you can actually go and see, which are well worth looking at if you do get a chance. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight the crux of this battle. Another reason why this battle was so important, in fact probably the main reason why this was important, was that the Romans, in terms of what a battle is, a battle normally lasts for about a day. This lasted for 2 whole days. Imagine the bloodshed that had been, occurring across the field. I mean, this was, 2 days of fighting. You can imagine how exhausted both sides were, especially with the Romans with their armour, and they were away. This was like a football match. They were away. They're going to feel out of their comfort zone. In the end, unfortunately, though, fortunately for us, because we probably wouldn't be here, the Romans won. And the end result was the Britons retreated to Essex. But unfortunately for the Britons, it wasn't safe at all because the Romans chased them down. In the end, the Romans reached what we now call Colchester in Essex, which was the capital of Britain back then. They took it over, and the rest, as we know, is history.